The night was colder than usual, and the streets were almost empty when my friends stopped me in front of the abandoned mansion. For years, we had heard stories about the place. Some said a family once lived there and mysteriously disappeared, others swore they had seen shadows moving in its windows when no one had been inside for decades. The old iron gate leaned sideways, one hinge broken, and the walls were swallowed by wild vines that looked like claws scratching up toward the roof. To me, the house had always been a mystery, something I passed by quickly, never daring to glance too long. But that night, under the dim glow of a streetlight, it felt like the house was waiting. "Go inside," one of my friends laughed nervously, trying to sound brave. "Stay there for a while and prove you're not scared." The challenge sounded simple, but standing in front of that lifeless structure made my stomach tighten. I wanted to refuse, yet the thought of being called a coward pushed me forward. Taking the flashlight from my bag, I approached the gate. The moment I touched it, the rust flaked off under my fingers and the loud creak echoed through the empty street. It felt as though the sound had woken something inside. I stepped in slowly, every breath turning heavier. The grass inside the yard had grown taller than my knees, and the soil beneath felt damp, almost as if it had soaked up years of forgotten sorrow. My shoes sank slightly with each step. The windows were cracked and broken, some hanging loose, swaying with the breeze as though unseen hands were moving them. From somewhere deep inside, I thought I heard a faint thud, but it stopped before I could be sure. As I reached the front door, I shined the flashlight over it. The wood was split and blackened with time, and symbols carved into the frame caught my attention. They weren't drawings I could understand, strange lines, shapes, almost ritualistic. My pulse quickened, and for a second, I wondered if turning back would be smarter. But then my friends' voices echoed from behind the gate, laughing and calling me scared. I clenched my jaw and pushed the door. It didn't open at first, as though something heavy was holding it shut. With one hard shove, it groaned open, and a rush of icy air greeted me. It was the kind of cold that doesn't just touch your skin but slips into your bones. My flashlight beam wavered across the hallway inside. Dust floated in the air like tiny ghosts, and the smell of damp wood and something rotten hit my nose. The silence was unbearable. It was not the silence of an empty place, it was the silence of something watching, something that didn't want to be disturbed. Standing at the threshold, I realized this wasn't just an abandoned mansion. It felt alive, as though the walls had soaked up every secret, every scream, every lost breath of whoever had once lived there. And now, it was waiting for me. The door shut behind me with a dull thud, louder than it should have been, and the sound carried down the hallway like a warning. My flashlight beam shook in my hand as I tried to steady my breathing. The wooden floor creaked under every step I took, and the echo of it made me feel as if I wasn't walking alone. The deeper I went, the heavier the air became, so still that each breath felt stolen. The hallway stretched longer than it seemed from outside. Faded portraits lined the cracked walls, their faces blurred with age, but their eyes still seemed to follow me. My pulse thudded louder in my ears with every step. Somewhere in the darkness above me, something shifted. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't the house settling, it was deliberate, a faint scrape of movement. I froze, clutching the flashlight tighter. That's when it came. A voice. Soft. Almost delicate. A whisper, floating through the silence. "Are you alone?" I spun around, the light darting across peeling wallpaper and broken furniture, but the hallway was empty. The words still rang in my head, sharp and cold, like someone had whispered directly into my ear. My throat went dry. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, that maybe the wind had crept through the cracks. But no, there was something too human, too intentional in that tone. "Who's there?" I called, my voice trembling, barely recognizable as my own. The sound seemed swallowed by the darkness, vanishing almost immediately, as though the house itself had devoured it. The silence that followed was worse than the whisper. My ears strained for the smallest sound, my body tense, waiting. I could hear my heartbeat pounding, each thump echoing in the emptiness. My flashlight flickered, just for a second, and I thought I saw a shape at the end of the hall. It wasn't clear, just a hint of movement, like fabric swaying, there one moment and gone the next. I forced myself to take a step forward, then another. The whisper repeated, a little clearer this time, a little closer. Are you alone? Every hair on my body stood on end. My lips parted, but no words came out. I wasn't sure if I should answer, or if answering would mean inviting something I didn't want near me. The weight of the darkness pressed in from every side, and suddenly I wasn't just standing in an empty mansion, I was being addressed, singled out. The house wasn't abandoned. Something inside knew I was there. And it wanted to talk. My legs felt heavy as I forced myself down the corridor, the whispers still echoing in my head. I aimed my flashlight into every corner, but the beam only carved out fragments of the darkness, broken chairs, cracked walls, a staircase that seemed to lead nowhere. Then, out of the shadows, movement caught my eye. At first, it was only a blur, like the fabric of a dress drifting slightly in the stale air. I froze, my breath shallow. Slowly, she stepped into the pale light. A girl. She looked no older than me, dressed in a simple white gown that brushed against the dusty floor. Her long black hair framed her face, falling over her shoulders in uneven strands. What struck me wasn't her appearance, but her expression. It wasn't twisted or monstrous like the stories I'd always heard about ghosts. Instead, she looked calm, almost fragile, her lips curled into a small, nervous smile. "Don't be afraid," she said softly, her voice low but clear. "I just want to be your friend." The words should have calmed me, but instead they unsettled me more. Why would anyone in a place like this want a friend? I wanted to step back, yet something about her eyes stopped me. They were deep, almost too deep, carrying a sadness I couldn't explain. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to work. "Who are you?" "My name is Zoya," she whispered, tilting her head slightly, as if studying me. "I've been alone here for so long." She took a small step closer, her bare feet making no sound on the wooden floor. I noticed the way her dress shimmered faintly under the weak glow of my flashlight, as though it didn't belong fully to this world. The more I looked at her, the more I felt an odd pull, like she was real, human, and yet something about her presence bent the air around her. Despite the fear twisting inside me, I found myself speaking again. "Why are you here?" Her smile faltered for a second, and her eyes lowered. "Because no one else talks to me anymore." The words lingered between us, heavy and sorrowful. For the first time since I entered that house, I wasn't only afraid, I felt a strange pity, a connection I couldn't explain. She wasn't screaming, she wasn't chasing me, she was just standing there, asking for companionship. But deep down, something told me this wasn't as innocent as it seemed. Because even as she smiled at me again, I noticed something off. Her shadow didn't move with the rest of her. It clung too tightly to the wall, darker than it should have been, as if it was alive on its own. That was the moment I realized, whatever she wasn't normal. Her presence was strangely disarming. The way she spoke, the way her smile wavered, it almost convinced me she was just a lonely girl. For a few minutes, I even forgot where I was. The mansion's silence no longer felt unbearable, it felt like it belonged to her. We exchanged small words, her voice soft, delicate, as though she hadn't spoken to anyone in years. But then came the moment that shattered the fragile calm. When she extended her hand toward me, the gesture seemed so ordinary, so human. "Friends shake hands, don't they?" she asked gently, her eyes glimmering as if she was desperate for me to agree. I hesitated. Something inside screamed not to touch her, not to close the distance. Still, against my better judgment, I raised my hand and reached for hers. The instant our palms met, the illusion collapsed. Her skin wasn't warm. It wasn't even neutral. It was ice cold, sharper than winter air, like gripping solid frost. My heart skipped a beat, and a chill ran up my arm into my chest. Before I could pull away, I felt wetness against my fingers. I lowered my eyes and froze. Blood was dripping from her wrist, sliding down across my hand in slow, dark streams. I gasped and tried to yank my hand back, but her grip tightened, unnaturally strong, far stronger than her delicate frame suggested. Her face shifted slightly, not monstrous, not entirely, but her smile widened just a little too much, stretching in a way that made my stomach churn. "You feel it, don't you?" she whispered. Her voice was no longer soothing, it was hollow, echoing as though two tones overlapped. "I'm not like you. I've been gone for a long, long time." The more she held on, the colder I became, as though my very warmth was being drained into her. The flashlight flickered, shadows twisted on the walls, and for the first time since entering that mansion, I felt certain I wasn't just talking to a lonely girl. I was touching something that didn't belong in this world. I finally tore my hand free, stumbling back, my chest heaving. The blood that smeared across my palm wasn't fading like a hallucination, it was thick and real. Her smile didn't falter. Instead, she whispered again, her words like ice. "Now we're connected." The blood still stained my palm when the light flickered again, plunging the room into half-darkness. My heart hammered so loudly it drowned out every other sound. I lifted the flashlight, but she was gone, and no footsteps, no rustle of cloth, just empty air where she had stood seconds before. For a moment I thought maybe I had imagined it all, that my fear had twisted shadows into shapes. But then, her voice came again, impossibly close, almost brushing against my ear. "Don't try to leave me." The words froze me where I stood. I spun around wildly, but there was no one there. Only the hallway stretching into darkness, endless and heavy. My hand trembled so violently the light shook across the walls, and in its jittering glow I thought I saw her face, reflected in a broken mirror, in the corner of a portrait's glass, in the shimmer of dust. Everywhere and nowhere all at once. I stumbled toward the door, desperate to escape, but the silence of the mansion pressed down harder, as if the whole house wanted to keep me inside. Just as I reached the threshold, her voice returned, stronger now, layered with something inhuman. "I've been alone for 10 years. You're mine now. Break this friendship, and you'll never wake up alive." The flashlight died completely. Darkness swallowed me. In that pitch-black silence, I felt the air brush against my neck, like cold fingers grazing my skin. And then, nothing. The next thing I remember is bursting through the gate, running until my lungs ached, my friends' laughter turning to alarm when they saw my face. I tried to tell them what I had seen, but the words caught in my throat. How could I explain the hand that still felt like ice, the blood that wouldn't wash away no matter how hard I scrubbed? That night, I swore I had escaped. But as the clock struck midnight, lying in my own bed, I heard it again. The same soft whisper, curling into the darkness of my room. "Good night, my friend, don't even think of leaving me." And from that moment on, I knew the mansion hadn't let me go at all. She had followed me home.